Welcome back, foul players, and welcome to OWL by the numbers, keeping you updated and in the know for all things Fantasy Overwatch League. I am your host, Emily Drunk, and tonight on episode 66, we'll get you primed for this week's fantasy matchups after, a more stabilized week. But with that being said, I have to say it like I'm holding down the top spot in the pick'ems. After a couple of hosts backed out, Plebes was talking some mad shit going into Sunday because, he tied it up. And then after Sunday, and, I don't know if you've paid attention to this, but that tie is now gone, and now he's down 6. So It just comes to show how quickly things can change over the span of one day when it comes to the pick'ems. But, it feels good to maintain that spot. For how long that is going to be remains to be seen, but while I have the crown, I'll be sure to mention it time and time again, because, that's just what we tend to do around here.
That's how we roll. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've dropped back because last week I was on vacation, so it's why I wasn't here last week. And about Thursday at like 3:00, I was like, crap. I'm at a winery in Southern California, and I'm trying to be sly about it because if my girlfriend knew I was trying to do my Overwatch League pick'ems and setting my lineups, she'd throw wine in my face. So I was only able to actually set the lineup in our main league. And I wasn't able to do any of the other leagues or the pick'ems. So I'm a little bit behind now, and that's on me. I'll take full blame for that. So, but at least you're beating Ramses, because Ramses needs to get put in his place from time to time.
I mean, it has to be like an ongoing tradition where that just always happens. But I have to bring up the fact that since it's been a few weeks since you've been on the show, it's always coincidental, and I know it's not on purpose, but it's always like the week after you get third place is often a week that you're missing. And Ramses is trying to drum up the narrative that he lost this week, so Edge just gonna no-show.
Yeah, no, I lost last week and I showed up and he didn't, so he can go to hell.
Well, he's got his own stuff going on, after he finally found the graduation stage after like over a year. I don't know how big those stages are in Cali, but he finally got that piece of paper, and he's gonna be a little tied up in the meantime. Hopefully we'll have him back at some point to continue the ongoing discussions in regards to how bad the Houston Outlaws are starting to look.
Yeah. The outlaw high is going away a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to break it to you, it's like Outlaws fuel Outlaws.
Well, that's not the only honeymoon phase that's kind of ended, because Philadelphia Fusion are also kind of in the same boat over in APAC.
Mm-hmm. They are. But the Fusion are... I can't ever trust what the Fusion are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've made some of the most questionable moves in Overwatch League. Like, moving Fusion University over to Korea was just like, what?
Yep, and now they're stomping EU trials.
Yep. They're stomping it with our boy.
Mm-hmm.
Our boy Sugar Free, under a new name.
Yeah. It's always funny whenever the word, like, retirement, like, surfaces within Overwatch for the pro scene, because, like, we all know what that means. Because, like, even when Sugar Free, quote, retired from pro play, he was still actively subbing in a lot of the contenders teams.
Yes.
And now, he's with Fusion University for, however long. So, yeah, like, I'm just glad that he's playing, and I'm going to follow him no matter what title he is playing. But, it's good to have our boy back in the swing of things, and they've definitely been doing a ton of trolling in EU contenders trials because they have just been stomping teams. And it's very reminiscent of, like, the old Selfless Gaming days in regards to that. But anyways, on to fantasy, guys. So just as a reminder, we do have our Pick'em League. all of the weekly leagues that we have on Draft Buff, that would be the Draft Royale, as well as a Budget League, all of that stuff refreshes every week. So if you have signed up once, you're automatically in it. You just have to adjust your lineup. So just as an FYI, in case you guys haven't noticed that. Now, outside of that, we do have a couple of announcements in regards to, Overwatch League news. In regards to roster changes, we have the Toronto Defiant going out and sign in Aspire to a 30-day contract. Now, Ed, this kind of happened while you were on your little Cali trip. Toronto Defiant had put out a statement in regards to having 3 positive cases of COVID-19 within the organization. Now, only one of those we knew was a confirmed player on the roster, and it was affecting Logix. And of course, there were murmurs about other players being sick, but nothing concrete in regards to that. But basically, Toronto, they go out, they use a 30-day contract, which is a great way to, just kind of trial someone to see how they work. And if you need a quick fill-in, you have the opportunity to actually still have a manageable roster, so you're not having to forfeit any matches, which is obviously the bigger picture, and that's something that might even have to come into play here for another team here in just a little bit. But anyways, Aspire comes in for the Toronto Defiant, and, he did play, but I don't know if this was someone who had been added to Draft Buff in time. I'll have to double check on this just to see, because with it being a late edition, I don't know if these 30-day contracted players are someone that they're going to be actively pursuing right out of the gate, or if they're waiting to see if they are going to start that week and then going on from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I know Logic is the one that really got hit with it. He was at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he spent time in the hospital, but he had low oxygen levels, stuff like that. And people were thinking okay, there's a big outbreak on the team. And it didn't turn out to be as bad as previously thought before Toronto kind of stepped in and was like, no, our entire team does not have COVID. We don't have to forfeit or anything like that. So, but signing Aspire, it's probably one of those things that's, as far as fantasy wise, I don't see them really adding Aspire.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't if I was them, just because it's okay, he's on a 30-day contract. Why, I wouldn't make him available because people will abuse the system. You're abusing the COVID diagnosis.
Yeah, it's different to when, let's say, he started with the team at the start of the season, like with Toby,
Yes.
and Hotba with the Fusion. And just to clarify, I did pull up his stats on Draft Buff. He was added. He scored 54.3. But regardless, Toronto is currently on a bye. But that is a team who has kind of... They've had their highs and they've had a lot of lows. But that definitely impacted their fantasy potential this past week. So, regardless of if he stays on the team or not, a lifeline pickup like this isn't necessarily something that you're going to go out of your way to find unless you just don't have an active starter for that given week. This isn't something that you're going to slot in for a Draft Royale or anything like that.
Yeah, no, you're not going to do that at all. It's essentially, it happens in baseball. The most comparable thing is baseball. If somebody goes on the 10-day DL, you call up somebody from the minors for 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
This is what that is. You're not banking on them, but they might get some playtime. And that's kind of how I see this.
Absolutely. Now, outside of that, we did have news drop earlier today from the Paris Eternal that they have parted ways with their off-tank Elivote due to an injury. All right, I'm gonna pull up the tweet really quick because this came out of nowhere.
Yes.
So let's see here. Oh, I gotta scroll down because it's not the top one. Okay, so it says, rosters, please join us in saying thank you to Elivote. We are mutually parting ways today due to a wrist injury that is impacting his play. Then thanking him for all he's done here at the Eternal. We wish him the best with your future. Now, okay, this came out of nowhere. This is not a team that has another off-tank in their lineup. They basically had 2 tanks, 2 supports, and I had, a couple extra, DPS because they have Naga, Onigod, as well as Suna. But, Elivote has been a pretty viable starter for a lot of people in Fantasy Overwatch League. Mm-hmm. So this one out of the 2 is definitely more of a shockwave to be like an impact in your lineups this week. And, let me pull up his stats just so I can see where he's been at, because I know there's been weeks where he has been top 3 scoring overall.
Yeah. While you look that up, I just want to say how shitty this is. I hate this move because it's like, this does not scream Elivote wanted out. Mm-hmm. And when you say we mutually parted ways, that's crap. Like, we can all kind of agree on that. It's like, you can't play right now and you're out indefinitely due to an injury. So we're going to not have you on the team so we don't have to pay you. Like, that's a shitty scenario. Like, you should, like, if somebody gets injured, just like any other sport, if somebody gets injured due to excessive, playing with the wrists or stuff like that, you shouldn't be allowed to cut them. You shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to in any other sport to cut them due to injury unless you reach a specific injury settlement with the player. Like, you pay them to not have them on the team due to injury. So it's like, it's like, and even if Elivote agreed to this, it's one of those things where I think it's the culture of esports where people are like, well, I'm injured, I can't play, I need to step back from the game. No, you need to. This is where, like, having a union would be the best thing for the players. Like, Elivote should not be done with Overwatch or done with esports, and he even said that this, we'll see how this goes and stuff like that. So I hate the fact that he has to basically lose his spot in esports due to injury playing esports. Mm-hmm. So that's really annoying. And you know what? If this really comes back to bite Paris Eternal in the ass, well, you know what? That's your own fault. Like, this is 100% on you, Paris. Like, if you have to start one of your DPS as an off-tank, that's on you.
Mm-hmm. And that's the big question. Like, will they actually go out and sign someone on a 30-day contract due to this? But looking at Fantasy, Elivote was averaging per game 86.3 points, which is, based off the tank score in this season, isn't necessarily top tier, but I would say, like, if I had to grade it, I would say, like, B overall.
Yeah.
He has posted his highest games were 107.89 back in week 2, and then in week 6 he had 99.42, and then the week before that was kind of a misstep where he had like low 50s. But all in all, someone that in your draft leagues was definitely getting played. And, an off shot that, maybe he was someone that you were slotted into your draft royale leagues as well. So, it's not every day that we see an injury pop up where all of a sudden this person finds themselves out of a job. It's a really crap situation for the player. And
100%.
There's no way this doesn't impact Paris's play in the weeks ahead, knowing that they're either going to have to sign someone, on that 30-day contract, or to just get the slot in a DPS player to fill that role. So that's definitely going to be a story to keep an eye on when they next play. Now, looking back, week 7 brought some pretty big numbers, Ed. I have to say, like, overall, I think point totals when you're looking at kind of like your draft royale leagues, for total points, the the average points per week has honestly this season been kind of low. Like there's been a lot of weeks where league totals have been like 550-ish, at the very highest like 580. We're not seeing like the crazy like 1100 point weeks like we had seen this past season, which was absolutely ludicrous at the time. But we had some pretty monster numbers, and there was one team in particular that was holding down a lot of the spots. So why don't you quickly go over our support lineup here? Because, we had some interesting things there as well in regards to one particular team.
Yeah, basically it was the Dallas Fuel. Let's just throw that out there, and the simple fact that the Dallas Fuel kind of dominated in fantasy, but their matches were a 3-0 win
Mhm.
and then a 3-1 loss. So it wasn't like any crazy amount of maps that they did this. They just scored really well. So number one, you had Fielder at 156. So great showing for Fielder. And then second, you had Violet at 154. And then in third, you had the Shoo train in sitting at 136.1. So it really was the Fielder and Violet show. And my pick at the beginning of the year of probably the best support of Fielder is starting to kind of show its face, because he started off slow, but he's really picked up.
Yeah, he's definitely been putting up some monster numbers. And, it was always interesting to me that Fielder and Repel were always kind of at the same cost. And then seeing the difference in their points this week, I think Repel had only put up, let me pull it up. It was like 77 points this week. So less than half of what Fielder did. So I can only imagine a differential in regards to the cost of this week now. Whereas before it was only like a 1 coin difference between the two, despite the fact that Fielder was putting up more points overall. But I want to talk about the Shock, because the Shock definitely intrigued me this week, because we got to see a lot of Violet paired with Twilight, where Twilight was coming in to play the Anna, and actually had Violet playing the Brig, which is not something that we've really seen. So we didn't really see... Let me see real quick. Did FD God actually play this week? Okay, he did. So it was a very even split then, because he had 82 points. But it was just the fact that we haven't really been seeing a ton of, like, the double flex support, especially when one of those flex supports is actually playing the Brigida. Like, normally you have a DPS going back to Brig Jail, or you're having the main support moving over, but that was not the case with this team. But, the Shock, honestly, after they kind of got their ass kicked by, Dallas prior, the Shock have just played like a very angry team, and we're really starting to see their potential shine in where, we had high expectations for the team, and I wouldn't say they stumbled out of the gate, but they haven't been as dominant as like a championship caliber team as they had been in the past. And now they're really starting to pick up that sort of momentum. And, I said last week, with Reinhardt being out, Smurf is going to be coming in. He's going to be playing. Starting for your main tank on this squad. That was the case. And, last week, Smurf was only like 25 coins. This week, the number adjustment shot him up to 45.
Yes.
And, if you played Smurf last week, he put up some decent numbers overall.
Yes, he did.
But tanks as a whole really showed up this week, where we actually saw like quite a few tanks hitting above 100, where before we had quite a few tanks struggling to even hit 90.
Yeah, this has been an anomaly. I think people are, we see these points and they're actually quite high for what I expect. And the reason I'm saying that is, this week and last week, we have not had any matches where it was 3-2. Every single match was a 3-1 or 3-0. for the past 2 weeks. And to have good numbers like this in 3-1, 3-0 weeks is actually pretty impressive. And the Tanks are definitely showing, like what they can really do. And it's nice to see because, our top 3 tanks were Hanbin, Space, and Fearless. It's nice to see a main tank up there. Because, it adds a little bit more complexity. Like with supports, you're still obviously going to be choosing flex supports over main supports. But now that you have like main tanks getting the same points as flex tanks without the extra maps, then you're like, okay, well now you open up a whole new can of worms when it comes to the tank field. Especially in these daily the weekly leagues where you pick a new roster, you can take a flyer on a starting main tank for lower to spend more on maybe a DPS or on a flex support. So the tank is definitely going to be your hit or miss category.
Right. And, it's not every week where we see both tanks from the same squad actually making it into the top 3.
Exactly. without it being like extra maps.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know they did draw in one of the series, so it did kind of extend it.
Yeah, it did extend it a little, but not.
But no true, like, 3-2.
Yes, no true 3-2, or like, hey, we had 2 3-2 3-2s this week. We're going to dominate.
Right on, which would lead to our top 3 in damage this week. We had Kevster of the LA Gladiators posting 124.3 points. We had the Dallas DPS duo in at number 2 and 3, with Sparkle getting the better of Doha, 113.7 to 112.4. All right, so that's 2 lines back to back with Dallas starters making it into the top 3. Only one not being up there is Repel. And, I was trying to think back, like, has there ever been another instance where we had the vast majority of a starting lineup in the top 3 scores across the board? I can't remember off the top of my head. But when I saw that initially, I was like, man, that is actually absurd. Just the level of consistency.
This team is ridiculous. Like, the Dallas Fuel... They have something special going on, and honestly, the thing is if they could upgrade over a Repel, like, you hate to say it, like, Repel is probably their weak spot at this point. The only other thing I could see them doing is if Godsby and the Spark part ways, which has been rumored, Godsby would not be the worst choice to join the Dallas Fuel. As like a hit scan.
Well, the only problem with that is more so, even if they do sign him, they still need the visa, and that's already the issue that they're having currently with Pine.
Oh yeah, I guess I just don't think of that anymore, like the visa issues. But yeah, that makes sense.
That's still prominent for Korea coming to NA.
For some reason, we don't want people coming into this. I'm not even going to finish that sentence because it's way too political.
Now, opening a can of worms.
Exactly.
All right, well, looking ahead, we have week 8 here, which also okay, hold on. Let me look at the lineup. Is this a knockout week? It's so hard to keep track of the format nowadays.
It would be week 3 of this.
Yeah, because we have 2 to-be-determined games on June 6th, so yeah.
Oh, that is so stupid. I'm sorry. Like, it's just... Yeah, I'm not even gonna go down that road because I have before.
Yeah, so we have the knockouts this week, and then the actual tournament starts next week. So regardless, okay, so from a pick'em perspective, I remember going into the Melee, they had an issue with the knockout stage, primarily with how quickly they locked the pickups for that. And I don't know if it was a mistake on their part, but they did basically like reinstate it where you could go back, add your selections. So a lot of people weren't kind of like screwed out of the scoring potential at that point in time. So I'm curious to see if there's going to be any sort of adjustments going into the knockout stage in this tournament, knowing that they left it a little bit more open for people to submit their picks. Because I know initially I missed it, and I know a lot of other people had missed it initially as well because of whatever time they had the lock set to.
Yeah.
Uh, so hopefully it's smooth sailing for this tournament. But we'll have to wait and see. But looking at week 8, we got some pretty spicy matches that I can't wait to dive into here in just a bit. But every week we've been talking about who we're eyeing at starting in our draft royales. We've been talking about our budget picks, which has kind of shifted a little bit to Ed in regards to kind of like the cost fluctuation of these players, where, before, every once in a while, there would be someone who was pretty much egregiously, like, underpriced that was just such an obvious pick. And, like, Monk comes to mind for the Chained Hunters, because for a while there, he was 25. Last week, Smurf was 25.
Yeah.
Where now, a lot of these budget picks are, kind of like in the 45 to 55 range. It's so weird, like, that has become the new norm now in regards to the budget, where we are starting to see more aggressive adjustments for fantasy here.
Yeah, no, it 100% is that. Like, I've taken a new approach with the budget league, is essentially almost taking the cheapest team
Okay.
possible, within reason, and
The
going
Valiant.
from there. Well, I'm not taking the Valiant, but you know what I mean. I'm kind
Mhm.
of taking the cheapest in that route, and then building my team that way. So you don't have to be super budget conscious. You have to be budget conscious, but like if you choose a pretty cheap team, you're looking at 50 to 55 points, like cost per player, which is not great, but you're still going to get startable players. And I think that's the key. I mean, I looked at it this week. Let me bring up my budget team from this week. You know, I mean, I have Slime. You kind of have to take the main supports. You can't really afford flex supports in a budget league.
I have something to say about that, because this is a strategy I used last week. So I going into last week, I was top in the budget league. And I put up
Mm.
532.37. So going in, this was my plan, Ed. I was like, all right, I know Pine is not going to play. And I slotted him knowing that I would get 0 in that slot, so I could get double flex support. So here was my lineup for the week. Now, granted, you have to remember, I did not have a DPS started. But I picked up Feather from New York, who did okay. I had both Troy Yobin and Smurf for my tank line, so that alone was like 180 points. Then I had Fielder and Izayaki for my support lineup, with New York Excelsior as my team. But it was just a thing where it's like, okay, my best position to put myself in order to free up cap space is for me to purposely throw a dud
Do a
in there.
5-man team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, do a 5-man team.
And I don't know if that's going to work every week, but it's something that I want to play around with if it can ensure that I could have a very select flex duo for my support lineup that I know is going to put up numbers, because it will just offset that 0 in that column.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. That's it's a good plan, although I don't want to encourage people to do that because
Right.
it can blow up horribly
Oh,
in
yeah,
your
for
face.
sure.
Just a multitude of reasons.
Mhm.
It's the ultimate high risk, high reward type of play.
And it worked.
And it worked this week for you. But there are some good budget-ish people out there. I'm still going with Dalton.
Mhm.
He's decent. Um Slime and Mandu for my support line, I'm not against. And Gesture, I'm not sold on Gesture as as one of my tanks, but yeah, it's getting harder and harder every week
Right. It's
to
understandable.
do anything with all this. You just basically want people who are actually gonna play. Like I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to pick now.
I wish we had,
Y-
like, pulled stats, because I would be curious to see what the average point per cost is. Like, where people would rank there.
Mhm.
So then you could also filter it by, the lowest cost. Because there are definitely a lot of players who are pretty close to, like, that 1-to-1 in regards to cost to point. But there are a lot of picks in that category that I would be very bullish on starting, like, really any Titans player. Like, I'm still not a fan of actually starting even in the budget leagues. Just because, like, I know there have been weeks where some other DPS only posts like 30 points.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more like, what do you value more in the and again, these budget leagues are very, like, we're the only one I've heard of doing these budget leagues. So I guess we can kind of like go get off the budget league talk. But there are certain budget players that, are gonna help out the rest of your team. Like you said, Smurf at
Hmm.
45, I think is a very viable starting tank that is gonna make the rest of your team much better because you can afford better players. So it's like, oh, what do I do here? I can afford to get someone, like, I think, and I know he has not performed amazingly. He's still pretty good, but Alarm,
Hmm.
I'm still a big Alarm fan. At Carpe, I'm never gonna be like, don't pick Carpe. I'm not gonna ever be anti Carpe, and Carpe is only 62 points right now. And he may not be the best, but he's still really good. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
the problem I've had with fantasy this season, more so than last season, is when you're looking at the like quality of matchups. It seems like every week it's kind of been the common trend where you have, from a team by team perspective, um, and this isn't going to be true for all the teams, but a vast majority of them, you have like one really enticing matchup, and then one that's just kind of a gimme.
mhm.
And that's definitely true this week. You look at Florida, for example. They start their week against the Dallas Fuel, which is going to be
Yep.
a very competitive match. But then they face the Justice, who have really struggled in the June Joust, where we're still trying to figure out whether or not they're actually going to play Decay, which remains to be seen. But at this point, like, I don't even think Washington would be able to bounce back to actually make the June Joust, even if they did slot him in.
Yeah, because you only have 2.5 weeks to do anything.
Right.
So stupid. I'm sorry. I'm
I
I'm not
mean,
gonna get off this June Joust crap or all this stuff. Like, I'm just not going to.
but all in all, this week is definitely a lot of, all right, this is going to be competitive, and then the next one's probably going to be 3-0.
Probably.
And it's definitely rough because, like, even the Shock faced Justice in their second game. And
Mhm.
honestly, they faced the Titans in their first game, so like the Shock players kind of scare me this week to actually play,
Mhm.
because I can see those both being like 30-minute
Well,
matches.
yeah, it's like when people played Boston last year, or people who played Shanghai in season 1.
Hmm.
It's just like, do you really want anything that, like, what's gonna happen here?
Yeah, it's either you're gonna hit really low, where you might have middle-end success.
Exactly.
And at that point, you're just like, that's not really a sure thing. And even even if the point, even if like the cost is right, it still didn't feel good.
Yes.
Because a lot of times it just felt like you were punching up with having to do that with like the rest of your team because you weren't having a lot of legs in regards to the quick 3-0s against some of the worst teams in the league.
Correct. Yeah. Oh God. Oh, quick 3-0 is the worst thing in fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so brutal. You're like, my team played amazing, but my fantasy team did nothing.
Right. So must starts this week. Just looking at some of the matches, like I actually like both the Boston matches. They play the Eternal, who are that's probably going to be a 3-0 if Eternal doesn't sign anyone. Like Boston has looked pretty good this stage, so if they don't 3-0 Paris, I'm going to be mad. But their second match is against the Gladiators. That's going to be an interesting matchup, knowing how these teams have fared. So if I'm just basing off of that. That would not be a bad game to kind of build around. Like, Myunbun has been putting up some pretty good points. Shu just finished in the top 3. Space has been a little inconsistent, but his current tournament performance has definitely rebounded, so he's a much safer play compared to what he usually is. Looking at some of the other matches, though, like...
Anyone from the Mayhem.
Mayhem are still relatively cheap.
Yeah, and they have two really good, two good matchups. They play the Fuel. Boy, I don't think they're going to get shut out by the Fuel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to beat the Fuel, but they won't get shut out. And then they play the Justice. So, they probably, out of all these teams, have the best 2-match setup. The 2 matches they play are the 2... combined are the 2 best matchups. Because, you look at Boston, you talked about Boston, they play Paris, they play Gladiators. Well, one's a blowout, one's not a blowout. Gladiators, they play Boston, they play Paris. One's not a blowout, one's a blowout. The Shock are playing the Titans and the Justice.
Yeah, it's like the bottom 5 teams all have the worst matchups possible for them.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the Mayhem are getting actually good matchups, and they're not a crap team. So, I would load up on Mayhem players if you can. So that would be my big recommendation for this week, at least for the NA.
Mm-hmm.
I again, I'm not well versed in the APAC region, because I have not been watching it as much, so I can't speak to that as well as I can the NA region. But yeah, pick up your Florida Mayhem players.
Yeah, because both their DPS are middle in 60s at this point.
Yep. Yaki and BQB are, I think, 63 and 62.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's both, fairly reasonably priced DPS that are going to have 2 good matchups this week.
Yeah, in regards to APAC, I know Fitz had a pretty good week for the Dynasty, bringing in a lot of Doomfist kills. I remember seeing one of his stat cards for one of the maps, and it was just some of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen from a Doomfist player, or Doomfits in this case. So he's definitely someone that I would eye. But it's just just looking at the matchups, it's just so all over the place. I don't think it's going to be a consistent week of scoring. This is probably going to be another one of those weeks where your point totals are going to be around 500.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see something like that. Yeah, it's not going to be a big week. It's going to be... You're going to scrape by if you get a win.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you hit the perfect combo of sleepers for the week, which is, I think almost the case every week. But, you having Smurf last week, and then, that's the perfect sleeper to have.
Yeah, which, he didn't score a ton of points, but just value-wise for his cost was on the higher echelon of that.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely was. Oh, I miss watching all the games this week.
Yeah, Plebes is saying, call me crazy. Okay, you're crazy. Like the Spark this week, they face the Valiant and Train to Hunters for their matchups. And, Spark have definitely been making a ton of changes to their lineup here as of late. Obviously, there's been a lot of talks in regards to one of their
Godsby.
players departing soon with Godsby. I think as long as they start shy, the Spark are in a much better position to succeed. Which is good to see, because that was a team that had a ton of talent that just couldn't figure out what the hell to do with them. And then they've just kind of like middled out in APAC, but they've started to pick up some steam there. So I'm excited. It's great to see. And you know, whether or not the Valiant will ever be super competitive remains to be seen. Just not seeing it, and I wouldn't even start him in fantasy.
Yeah, I wouldn't start fantasy wise. I want to see, where do you want it? Like, so with DM rumored to be leaving Shanghai,
Retiring.
retiring.
Yeah, that's the rumor.
Godsby good in Shanghai?
I would not play him over Fleta.
I wouldn't play him over Fleta, but you know, he might get, I don't know, where can he go?
And remember too, like they had just signed 2RU. Granted, he's not the same role.
Yeah, it's not the same. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But the Spark are going in the right direction, plebes. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, 2RU did play some maps. Didn't post monster numbers. He only had like 33 points this past week. But you know, it's still good to see signings happening and then actually getting to see them play.
Yes. Not just, hey, we're gonna sign you and then not play you.
Mm-hmm.
Which has been the the norm lately in the past year and a half.
Yeah, but anyways, looking ahead, let's talk about some of the marquee matches for Pick'ems this week. So at Thursday, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, and I know we're looking forward to this. We got the Dallas Fuel going up against the Florida Mayhem. So, all right, Ed. You know, a lot of the talk about Dallas this year has obviously been Xe, you know, having to step away for a bit. Basically, Dallas breaking the meta, running through Melee. Then all of a sudden, we enter a new meta where hit scan prowess is way more apparent. And Dallas did get exposed by the Shock this past week, but Dallas has not looked bad regardless, because they're still able to play their comfort picks with the dive tanks. You know, playing the Monkey and the D.Va, which has been the bread and butter for this team. Florida has been a team, I would say, who has probably learned the most from their losses. Where I think team growth overall for them has been at an exceptional rate compared to the rest of the league. And, you know, I've talked at length before about the coaching staff on that team and the work we've seen behind the scenes with Kuki, and just the morale and the camaraderie with that team. And, you know, this one is very intriguing because I both of these teams have looked lights out. But
there's a but.
But the question is, has the, you know, exposure this past week with the hit scan problem, is that going to rattle the Dallas Fuel? Because coming out of the gates, we saw a lot of these top performers after the main Melee really struggle to find themselves. And a lot of people were expecting that to kind of be the same case with Dallas, where, you know, with Dallas, they still looked pretty good, but there have been more holes in the game because the hero pool in itself definitely impacted their DPS duo pretty substantially compared to a lot of the other teams in the league. So, looking at this matchup, who are you picking? Because both of these teams have had very high highs and some low lows at this point. But who do you think is going to be more consistent here?
I'm going with Dallas. It's hard for me to pick against Dallas. I actually have Dallas winning this one 3-1.
Okay.
I would not be. This is a matchup where I would not be surprised if it went 3-1 the other way. But I'm going with Dallas 3-1. Yes, the hit scan is being ousted more for not having the hit scan. But we also thought that in the Melee.
Mhm.
and then they turned they're like week one, they're like, oh, they have no hit scan, they're doomed. And then you know what? They just showed their true colors and they could adapt to anything. So I think they're going to come back this week with a vengeance after getting ousted by the Shock for not having the hit scan. And I think they're really going to come through and just wreck things this whole week.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So, like, I do like the idea of, a team of this caliber really learning from a loss and correcting their mistakes. I'm trying to see if there are any odds posted anywhere for this match, just because I'm more curious than anything. Because I would imagine that this one would be fairly close in a lot of the money lines.
Yeah.
But
I would imagine it's close.
I did too also tip the Dallas Fuel. And for so long I was like, okay, this is gonna be the match to go 5 maps. Absolutely. Then it's just like every week though, that has not been the case. Like teams have been better at actually finishing matches and not going the distance, which is such a weird thing to see because for a long time that had always been the case. There were teams that were plagued, they couldn't close the maps out, or they would always go to the map 5. Hell, it happened to Philadelphia Fusion all the damn time. Then suddenly, I don't know what changed. I don't know if it was the meta dictating things to be otherwise, or if it's just the level of field changing that much year to year to make that be the case. But it's been an interesting storyline to follow because, for the most part, before you're like, okay, what's going to be the most competitive matchup that could go to a map 5? But now we're seeing the monster numbers even in 4 map series, where now all of a sudden we're not really approaching fantasy a lot of the times in the same way because of that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can't really rely on things like that we used to be able to. Which, I think is overall a really good thing. Because when you could bank on stuff like that, then it yes, it had the skilled players rise to the top, but then the more casual fans are like, well, this isn't fun. So I'm kind of glad they it's not as predictable.
Yeah. I cannot find odds anywhere. Oh well. Sometimes it just be like that. What can you do? But anyways, moving on to Friday, another aforementioned match. At 12 p.m. Pacific time, we got the Boston Uprising against the Los Angeles Gladiators. All right, so this is another one of those teams where, for a long time, Ed, gatekeeper status of the Overwatch League. This is a team that was consistently like top 6, top 8. Come playoff time, they had some successes, but no championships of the name. And a lot of questions about the support line and how the addition of Moth would impact a lineup, what sort of hero compositions we'd be seeing, whether or not Birdbrain can maintain the amount of consistency on hit scan, whereas he was kind of like one of the big question marks going into this past season that was quickly washed away. So nice rebound performance, and I have to say, like, Kevster showed up last week, which I was really happy to see on the Echo, and I'm expecting some more lights out play from him on that front. But Boston has looked like a completely different team in this meta, or really even this season as a whole. But is Boston ready for a team like the Gladiators, where, sure, they've had a lot of success this season? Valentine has definitely been popping off. He's definitely lived up to potential. And, regardless of him having to play roles that maybe he wasn't comfortable on initially, we don't have to worry about that because Tracer's banned and Valentine can play as comfort hero. So you're really starting to see this completely other side of the Boston Uprising this season. And they're looking like a playoff team for the June Joust. Who you got in this one?
I'm still picking the Gladiators on this one, just because I think overall they have more skill. as a team, but it's going to be a close 3-2 for me between the Gladiators and the Uprising. Um, the Boston has looked really good. They really have. But the Gladiators have also super impressed.
Mhm.
Especially like with the three-headed monster they have at the support lineup, because Moth is not playing every map.
Right.
So like you have a great support lineup. You have what has turned out to be what everyone thought was the weakest part of their lineup turn into their strength in the DPS lineup. So I think the Gladiators will pull this one through.
Yeah, for me, the thing that always catches me up with the Boston Uprising is, yes, they did start 2-0 in the June Joust. They
Yeah.
they faced Toronto Defiant and Washington Justice, and both of those teams really
Or
didn't have a grasp of the new meta. Where
no,
Boston definitely has looked a lot better with what we are seeing in play. So it's kind of like, I want to buy into the hype. I want to believe that Boston has moved from, that like 17 to 20 slot in the league to being more middle of the pack. So this,
don't fall into the fusions hype.
right, this is basically the testing grounds for this team. No matter what happens in this game, this team is going to make the June Joust. Like, I fully expect them to finish the June Joust
Yes.
3-1. They'll get their playoff spot, and we'll see where they go from there. They have a softball opening match against the Paris Eternal, but I think the Gladiators are just a completely different beast, and I don't think it's gonna go 5 maps personally. I think the Gladiators will probably take it 3-1. And like, I will say the thing with Pick'ems this year too is, knowing that we really haven't seen those 5 map series, it never feels good or not risky to pick a 3-0. And there's been a ton of 3-0s.
A lot of 3-0s.
Where all of a sudden, like, these small leads or, just points overall can quickly vanish like that, like just in a snap, where it really has brought a completely different dimension to Pick'ems this season, having to pick the map scores, knowing that we have seen a ton of 3 Overwatch, some of which have been really unexpected, and then others you're just like, all right, well, I'm gonna pick 3-1 just because, like, surely this team is gonna take a map, right? Like, and then all of a sudden it's a 3-0, and you're just like, really?
Really, guys? Really?
It's like every week that seems to happen at least like 5 times.
Basically, that's what you should be going for. Like, I'm getting more. I'm throwing out 3-0s a lot more in my predictions, just because I'm like, you know what? I just don't see it. There's a lot of really, really, really bad teams. A lot of them. And it's one of those things where it's, you're going to start seeing it more and more. We're getting at least 5 a week now. Like, that's a lot of 3-0s. Yeah, so you're bound to see a bunch this week.
I want to double check to see what the double point games are for the week. All right, on the NA side, the double point game is Paris Eternal versus the LA Gladiators. Okay.
3-0.
APAC side. Hey, look at that. Imagine that. It's actually the one that I picked out for the third one. It is the Saturday match at 5 a.m. Pacific time of the Chained Hunters up against the Hanzhou Spark. All right, so, I already talked about the Spark, the changes that they've made. Obviously, there's rumor mill stuff involved with that as well. Hunters, and this is another team where everyone has constantly been like, oh man, they're just gonna roll with it. The Hunters are the team to look out for in APAC. And it's like, every time I hear someone say that, I kind of have to roll my eyes, because they've had glimpses of greatness. But a lot of times, they're just lost in the shuffle. where
I've been hearing about the Hunters' greatness
for,
for 2 years now.
for a while, and you're still waiting.
Yep, I'm not gonna hold my breath on the Hunters turning it around. Let's just get that out of the way. I don't know. They've definitely been performing better than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going up against the Spark this week, and the Spark are legit the hottest team in APAC. I believe they shut out the Dragons. I think they 3-0'd the Dragons.
They did.
And that's not an easy feat. The Dragons were in the championship game, against the Fuel. So it's like, is Shanghai that bad in the June Joust, or is the Spark that good? And I'm going with that. The Spark have been that good. So, I'm going in this one. I'm going 3-1 Spark over Hunters.
Yeah, Spark.
I'll say Hunters take a map, but I don't see it being a close matchup.
Yeah, Spark are on a 3-game winning streak right now. But even if you take it a step further back, all right, let's look at match history here real quick, Ed. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 matches between these two overall. If you were to guess how many matches the Hunters have won out of those 7, what number would you throw out there?
2. I would say they're 2 and 5.
1. They won 1.
I was close.
And it was a 3-0.
The only thing is in this game, in this Overwatch League, you can't even compare teams' records against them previously based on a month ago.
I think the only time there was an exception to that, and this goes back to the Dynasty and the Lunatic High Core, where in the past, even dating to contenders, they always struggled against select teams, and that continued into the Overwatch League. But yeah, I know what you mean. Things change so fast and so often that even if there's a perception of, okay, this team has our number, there are so many different moving variables on a month-to-month basis that it just shuffles everything further out of line,
The perfect example is the Boston Uprising. What was it, 2 years ago? In season 2, I want to say? Might have been season 1, where basically they went when they broke it up into the 4 seasons, essentially. And it was, okay, Boston, crap, first place, crap. I think that was season 2, but they had that one meta that really worked for them, and they were pretty darn good, and they were they won it. And that's the perfect example,
right?
Of what can actually happen. I think it was the 2019 season. So yeah, it's just one of those things where don't read too much into it, but in certain instances you can. But I think you're going by the wayside, and you're talking about the old Seoul Dynasty team, and they've been a team for a while, and they had problems with other specific whole teams when the meta wasn't changing every month.
Either way, I'm always a fan of playing the hot hand. Yep. I'm expecting the Spark to keep on rolling here, since they've really honed in and found their identity as a team.
3-0 or 3-1?
I think I have it 3-1 if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But I'm definitely gonna tune in for that one. Obviously, it's not gonna be live, but that's definitely gonna be one of the APAC games that I check out this week. Cause I'm not gonna wait. Well, I'll be getting ready for work, but I'm not gonna watch it and do that at the same time. But anyways, that's basically it for the week. Just a quick update. I know Anura had posted something on the Overwatch League Network Twitter about the show going on hiatus. I don't know the status of that, like, obviously, I know they've had a lot of stuff going on, IRL, job stuff happening. So their schedules got like swapped quite a bit. I'm not sure entirely what I'm gonna do with that show for now. So I don't know if I'll try to transition it into like a one-man show where it's gonna be more recap based or what I'll do there. But for now, like, don't expect anything to be uploaded to that feed for the foreseeable future until we kind of get all that stuff sorted out. And, whenever I get a game plan or something in motion, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So just an update in regards to that. As for this show, of course, the best thing to do is to head on over to iTunes, write us a review, let us know how we're doing, and if there's anything you would like to see us incorporate into the show. We're always looking to improve the podcast for you guys, so let us know on that front. Outside of that, if you would like to support the podcast, you can do so via Patreon at patreon.com/OWL Network. And we have tiers there starting at just $1 a month. And you too can join the likes of our Master and Above patrons, Daniel, Owl, Kesha, and Plebes in helping our network grow. Now, outside of that, we have a plethora of different ways how you guys can contact our show. So, Edinar, please let them know how they can do just that.
All right. So you can reach us through email at contact@owlnshow.com. We do have a Twitter, and that's at OWL by the numbers. We do have a website that we post everything on, and that's at owrecall.com. We have a YouTube, youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We have a Discord at discord.me/OWLN show. We do stream live on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLN show. So we are a Twitch affiliate, so help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. Our podcast network does stream pretty regularly. So like Totem said, Overwatch League Network is currently on hiatus. But we have OWL by the numbers, which normally airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, but we just didn't have the stats in time to record.
It's almost like there was a holiday on Monday or something.
Yeah, it's weird. And then Heroes Never Die, our variety show, will be airing Thursdays at 2:30 Pacific bi-weekly. It will be a little early tomorrow because I have a birthday thing to go to. But we will be doing that every other Thursday. So make sure to tune in there. And you can follow me personally on Twitter, and that's at Edinar83, or at Twitch at twitch.tv/Edinar. Totem, where can they find you at?
Well, you can find me over on Twitter at Simply Drunk, and if you want to yell at Ramses through, the void or on the graduation stage or whatever, you can find him on Twitter at Ramses_OW, and of course you can check out his Overwatch League podcast, which is still ongoing, which is Push the Point, which he does with Labasco. So go support a fellow Chicagoan.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess. But anyways, guys, again, just a reminder, games start on Thursday this week. That would be tomorrow. Hopefully by the time you guys are listening to this, you have already done that. You already know about it. And you don't listen to it and then be like, oh crap, I didn't set my lineup or anything like that.
Me?
Yeah. Don't pull an Edinar.
Well, I was on vacation, so that's understandable.
You had a reasonable excuse.
Yes.
But the rest of you
suck.
Not so much. But anyways, we'll see you guys tomorrow for Heroes Never Die. You guys take care and have a good night.
Peace out.